This is 37C. This is about the dynasty that follows the Tang Dynasty in China. So you have Sui, then Tang, then Song Dynasty in China. Let's learn about the Song. You can see they covered quite a lot of land without necessarily usurping as much land as the Tang had previously. So note number 1, in 960 AD, the Kirghiz people overthrew the Tang, allowing for the rise of the Song Dynasty. And they didn't successfully unite China like the Tang had done. Note number 2, there were rival dynasties like the Liao Dynasty and nomad Khitan people would invade. So the Song moved the capital away to the south to Hangzhou to kind of be safe from those invading forces. Note number 3, this was a big development that the Song did in introducing rice from Champa, which was a growing region in Vietnam. And this rice was kind of super rice. It quickly ripened and allowed you to do 2 complete plantings in a year. So there was a lot more food available in China. And the Silk Road continued to be accessed for trade. I'll move this. Champa rice was traded on the Grand Canal, the Silk Road, the Indian Ocean, all of these trade routes. So rice kind of went all over at least the Eastern Hemisphere from China. Note number 5, getting into the age of exploration, which we'll eventually talk about when Europe gets in there as well. China kind of began their age of exploration before Europe. They began building junks, which is what they called ships with 4 sails, a rudder, and they were strong enough to make long distance trips at sea. And it is possible that during this region, some of those junks made it across the Pacific to the Americas. So that's one possibility of how some of the indigenous peoples of the Americas first arrived. Now, I read a book about this process, this terrible, true process of foot binding, and it really was very true, very strange, and very sad. So only upper class women were good enough to have their feet bound in this way. But I think you would definitely pray and ask God to make you a lower class woman in this society, because the upper class women, their feet, to get into this shape and to be this deformed, they had to be bound like this, tied and broken, basically, when they were 6 or 7 years old. They continued to constrain them. So yes, the foot was trying to grow, but they would rewrap it. And yes, the foot would decay. So yes, it would be very malodorous. It would smell terrible. So they'd have to use they'd wrap it up, and then over it, they'd put other perfumes and ointments and things to try to mask the smell of this rotting foot. But the worst thing of all is that these little girls, they would run and play and just enjoy their childhood and their freedom and running and playing. And then when they were about 6 or 7 and they bound their feet, they couldn't even walk anymore. The rest of their lives, they were supposed to sit there. This really crippled the people that it did this to. Then they had to be kind of carried around and pampered. They were just supposed to stay in a room. Talk about the objectification of women. When a woman later, maybe in her teens, would be married then, and her feet were bound like this, and she still couldn't walk, her husband would always know exactly where she was, really keep her kind of locked away like a belonging. So I'm sure this is going to make some of you mad if you didn't know about this before, foot binding in Song, China. And it continued for a long time. Really awful. Let's go to the next slide. These are the shoes that they would put over those feet. Aren't they beautiful? As we talked about, note number 7, foot binding reinforced subordination of women, and that they had to stay home. They literally couldn't go anywhere. And they couldn't bind the feet of the lower class women because they couldn't do their jobs then. So this is a time when you would definitely want to be in the lower class. Oh my goodness. To cripple someone, to imprison them. And now we're going to talk about Korea and the Koryo dynasty.